In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator in this Volkswagen Jetta. Let's get into it. We're going to pull the battery cover off, just slide it up. There may be some little tabs that you have to push in on both sides. Push those in. We'll go to the negative terminal. Using a 10mm socket or wrench, we want to loosen up this nut. Take the connector off and just set it aside. We're going to remove the wheel, use a 17mm socket, take all the lug bolts out. When I get to the last one, I'm just going to hold the wheel on so it doesn't fall. And then pull the wheel off. We're going to remove the inner fender well, at least just the front part, and just slide it out of the way. And if you have a panel that's located in this area, you want to take that off. You probably have some push retainers that you just slide off with a trim tool. I'm going to use a T25 socket. Take these screws out. There's probably some screws down here or push pins. Those out. You can take it out completely or just move it out of the way like this. We're going to remove this pipe. You don't necessarily need to remove this pipe. You can work around it, but it's a lot more difficult, so we'll just take it out of the way. Using some hose clamp pliers, I'm just going to move this hose clamp up, and this will separate right here. Using a 10mm socket, take this nut off. Right here there is a clip. If you use a pick, and you can pull this down, get this into the service position. Once that's in the service position, you can slide this off, just like that. And then this will slide off over here. And set that aside. Now I'm going to use a 16mm wrench on the belt tensioner. You can use a belt tensioner tool. Take the tension off. Then I'm going to take a pin, or you can use a hex key. And as you take the tension off the belt, there is an area in the tensioner where you put the key, and that's going to keep the tension on the tensioner. So if you start by putting the key in first before you put tension on the tensioner, you can get it to line up. And then push it in. Then the tensioner is locked in the preloaded position or the service position, and then you can take the belt off. You just slide it off the alternator, off the idler pulley. And we can just leave the belt forward, out of the way, or you can take it off completely. Take it off the power steering pump. Just slide it down. Then we're going to pop this cap off. Just use a straight blade screwdriver and just pry it from the side. And pop right off. It's just stuck on there. I'm going to use a 6mm hex socket. Take this bolt out. Loosen that up. And that pulley comes right off. Now we're going to take the tensioner out. You're going to need a 13mm socket. Just reach up in there. There's 3 bolts you want to take out. You can do this from up top. It's a little bit tricky to see either way, from the bottom or the top. So just take those out. Just try to pull those bolts out. those loose. Grab the tensioner and just slide it down out of the way. I'm going to disconnect the connector for the AC compressor. Just use a screwdriver. Just a pocket screwdriver is fine, or even a pick, and slide that lever back. Disconnect that. Now we don't want to take the lines off because there's still a refrigerant in the compressor. But we're going to take the bolts out and move the compressor down. Using a 16mm socket, you want to take the two upper compressor bolts out. Pull that out. Pull this one out. Now just take a pry bar and just very carefully just pry this down. Just pry here, pry it down, work it back and forth a little bit. Go. And just slide this over out of the way. You might want to put something underneath so you can support it. The wire that goes to the back of the alternator, we're going to take this nut out right here using an 8mm socket. Pull that off. Slide that bracket out. Using a 12mm socket, take this nut off. Slide the cable off. And we have the connector up top. You try to reach up and slide the connector off. You just want to push down on that tab right there, and it slides out. I'm going to take these two bolts out, use a 13mm socket. Pull those out. I'm going to use a pry bar. Very carefully pry the alternator out. Now it's loose. I just slide it back with the alternator loose. This hose is in the way. There's a bracket right here. We just want to pop this bracket off. You can use a trim tool, or you can just pull it towards the back of the vehicle. Just using a trim tool, I'm just going to pry that back. That gives me a little bit of slack. You can push the hose up and out of the way. Just pull the alternator back. Just snake it past that. And you just got to reach around and make sure you get that hose over the top part of the bracket. All right, the hose is over. And just twist the alternator. Slides right out. Then you want to slide it back in place, same way it came out. Just be careful, get the hoses out of the way. Just don't force it. And you could disconnect that hose, but there's coolant in there. So then you'd have to deal with the coolant system. And if you don't have to, it's always better to just work around it. But if you're struggling, then you might want to disconnect it. All right, that's in place. I'll line it up, get the bolts started. Tighten the bolts down. Now I'm going to torque these bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Where the connector is, I'm just going to clean this up with a wire brush. Both sides. And connect the connector. Lock that down, make sure the cable goes over the stud right there. And we can put that retainer down there, or the clamp. And we'll put the nut on there. And we'll torque that to 15 foot-pounds. And put the nut on. And we'll tighten that down. Snug that down. Before we put the compressor up, these little bushings that are on the back side need to be pushed into the compressor a little bit. If you take a bolt with a washer on it, go through the bottom side, and then just take a socket that will go over the bushing, the top, and a nut. And you just tighten it down a couple turns. It's going to move that bushing in a little bit. It's going to make this a lot easier to install. Right. So I'm just giving it a turn, and it just moved it. Just that much is all you need. You don't really need a lot at all. It's just going to help those bushings move in. Slide it off, do the same on that side, and then we'll install it. Now I'll take the AC compressor and light it up. And see, it goes on a lot easier after moving those bushings. Take the 2 bolts, get those started. All right, those are both started. And tighten those down. And we'll snug those down. That's good. And plug the connector in. Lock it down. Now this bracket where these hoses are, just push that in position, lock it down. Now take the tensioner. I put all 3 bolts back in. Slide it up in position. Get the bolts started. And tighten these down. All right, those are all tight. Now line this up. Get the bolt in. And tighten that down. Snug, that's good. Take the cap, line it up, and lock it down. Now I take the belt, I'm gonna run it all the way up to the power steering pump first. Go over the pulley. That's all the way around. Then one side of the belt is going to go around the idler pulley, and up around the alternator, just like that. And the other side's going to come down around the compressor, AC compressor. And we'll go around the crank pulley, just like that. Those are all on. Once those are in position, we can pull that pin out of the tensioner. Just use a wrench, just loosen up the tension on the tensioner just a little bit, and pull the pin out and release it slowly. Double check all the pulleys, and they all look good. You want to just push this clip back in so it's in the regular position, just like that. I'll slide this over. And lock it in place. There we go. Slide this over the intercooler. Get that over the stud. And that's all in place. Then we can move the clamp over. Get that in position. It's good right there. And put the nut on. Snug it down. And slide this panel in place. Get everything lined up. Get the bolts started. And tighten these down. And if there's any push pins, put those in. And if you have the shield that goes right here, you want to push that in with any type of push pins. Now install the wheel. Line it up. Get the bolts started. Now we're going to torque the lug bolts to 89 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. And go around again, double check. Now connect the battery, the negative terminal, line that up. And we'll tighten this down. Make sure that's snug, give it a wiggle, that's good. And put the cover on, line that up. And lock it down.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.